Right, so thank you very much indeed, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. This is Magnus Nielsen, Lord Londonstone, and I'm just coming out of St James's Park Underground Station, which was one of the older underground stations. Let me just turn this round for yourself. Oh, not much you can see, but in fact it was built in 1868, which is only 4 years after the undergrounds first started running, so it's a very old one. Okay, so what I'm doing is coming up to the gates, and I have to get through the gates really to get started. So let me do that. Here we go. So just turn around to my left. And at this stage what I need to do is cross over the road. Ahead of me, that is Queen Anne's Gate, which I've covered in my previous video. This is Petit France, and this is a zebra crossing, which I'm now going to cross, just so you get a better idea of where it is I am and what I'm going to be talking about. So here we are. This is, well, the street ahead is Tothill Street, which is named after the Tote Hill, which was simply a mound. We don't know exactly where that was, probably in a place called Tothill Fields, which of course has disappeared years and years and years ago. The Tothill may actually have been a prehistoric round barrow, a burial place for some very eminent person during the Bronze Age. But anyway, ahead of us, this is at the other end of Tothill Street, is Westminster Abbey. So I'm pointing down towards Westminster Abbey at the moment. Turn round, we've already seen Queen Anne's Gate. And this is Petit France. I think I've mentioned before that Petit France takes its name from the French community that lived here long ago. I thought originally it was the Huguenots arrived in 1685, but I now realise, in fact, through further investigations, this was during the reign of Queen Elizabeth I. So that's quite interesting. Just before we cross over the road, you'll see here this large building. It's an extraordinarily large building. This is number 55 Broadway, which used to be the headquarters of the organisations that were responsible for all public transport in London from 1933 up until about 5 years ago. That's in 2020. They've moved out to the Docklands, so this large building, which at the present moment is empty, will be transformed into a hotel at some time in the not so distant future, I suppose. So Petit France, that would take us up to the rear door to the Wellington Barracks. We're not going to go there though. We're going to go through the station and come out the other side. Right, well, this is the station. This is where you get your tickets from if you want to travel on the underground. But what I'm going to do now is just bear around to the left, go all the way around. You'll see, in fact, this building was completed in the late 1920s, and it's of that style. It was all very modern, of course, in those days, and it was one of the tallest buildings in London at the time. Obviously not now. And right, make my way all the way around, just so that I can come out again. There's quite a lot of stuff around here actually which is worth talking about, but it does tend to be sort of situated at some distances from each other, so I'll just have to improvise as I go along. Okay, this is Broadway, the lullaby of Broadway. Will you imagine that? This is not anything like the Broadway in Manhattan. Nevertheless, we've got some modern buildings here that are pretty tall. at least by London standards. We'll move on and head up the Broadway and then turn right into Caxton Street. And you'll see what I'm doing in just a moment. Now, once upon a time, if I just turn back, talking about Tothill, I should have told you that somewhere around here in this direction, of course, it's disappeared a long time ago, there was the almonry of Westminster Abbey. That's the place where the monks used to distribute alms to the poor. Or when I say alms, I could mean anything. It could be a sort of food bank or old clothes or whatever the poor needed. They would distribute them. But of course, again, that sort of thing has disappeared with the Protestant Reformation in the 1500s. So here we are. This is Caxton Street, named after William Caxton, the man who brought the craft of printing to England in the late 15th century. The first man who started producing printed books in this country, printed books in English. And just walking down here, in a moment, you'll see St. Ermin's Hotel. Where is it? Just down here. St. Ermin's Hotel. Now, this hotel dates all the way back to 1895, and for many years it was the secret headquarters of Britain's official spy network. It's been turned into a hotel in sort of fairly recent years, I think around about the year 2000 or thereabouts. But it had another more sinister function, if you could think of it as sinister, before that, long before that. Now, carry on. I'm walking down Caxton Street and I'm heading west. And as I head west, I then come to a building called Caxton Hall. Here we are. And we're reminded that Sir Winston Churchill spoke here at the former Caxton Hall from 1937 to 1942. Okay, right, well, Caxton Hall was originally the town hall for the city of Westminster when it was built in 1883. There were meetings here, actually, meetings and concerts at the time, and also, I'd say, the great public meetings. The first Pan-African conference was held here in 1900. But more importantly, they started to have suffragette meetings from 1907. The suffragettes were a team of ladies who were campaigning for the right of women to vote. And I'll take you to their memorial, which is just a little way around, not far from here. Also, this place is noted as being the place for the assassination of a man called Michael O'Dwyer by Udham Singh. This took place in 1940. Udham Singh was particularly upset by the role that Michael O'Dwyer played in the Amritsar massacre in 1919. So he was shot dead here. Udham Singh was caught, of course, and then taken off and convicted of murder and later hanged. The first meeting for the campaign for homosexual law reform started here in 1960. That again makes that a notable reason for why this place should be important. But if you think this is all terribly sort of left-wing and progressive, it's also worth noting that in 1967 it was the place for the first meeting of the National Front. Because it was a town hall, it was also a register office for marriages, so various people had their marriages confirmed here. Elizabeth Taylor, Roger Moore, Peter Sellers, Yehudi Menuhin were all married in this place. Right, I'm going to walk down here. This is, I say, is Caxton Street. I'm going to come to the very bottom, and at the bottom of Caxton Street you have Buckingham Gate, which leads off towards Buckingham Palace. And I will, as I say, I shall do something about a video on Buckingham Palace, maybe one or two, but not just at the moment, because there are plenty of other stuff to talk about. To give you a context, Palmer Street, named after, I think it was a Dr. John Palmer, who had organised almshouses for poor people in this district. And of course that's many hundreds of years ago now. When I say many hundreds, I mean probably the 1700s. And while we're talking about poor people living in the district, all those years ago, we're now approaching the Blue Coat School. Blue Coat School, spelt B-L-E-W-C-O-A-T, although of course it meant blue coat as in a blue coat. And the proof of that is just over the doorway. As we come up here, you will see one of their pupils, a statue of him wearing a blue coat. And it was a school here from the year 1709. That's when it was founded, and it remained a school all the way up until 1926. After that, it then became private property. It was sold off, and eventually it fell into the hands of the National Trust. As I've said before, the National Trust no longer is located in the building which I used to think it was located in. They've moved off to Swindon. But this I recall, this was the place where you could get interesting souvenirs of England in the National Trust souvenir shop, which unfortunately you can't these days because things are changing all the time. Brewer's Green. This place is called Brewer's Green. And now what I'm doing is heading up in the general direction of Victoria Street. And what do I find? We have here on the left hand side the statue of a dog, but not just any old dog. This breed of dog is known as a corgi, and it was the favourite breed of dog for Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. There's a little plaque all about that down here. This corgi was called Carol's, one of her. I think she had about 16 of these dogs at one time. But anyway, this is Carol, and we're moving on now to Victoria Street, which is just a little way ahead of us. So as I say, the reason why I do this videos is just to give you, the viewers, some idea of what it's like to be living in London and walking around the streets. Today is Tuesday, the 7th of October 2025, if you want to know the date. And we're heading up to to Victoria Street. It's not Queen Victoria Street, it's Victoria Street. There is a Queen Victoria Street, and I'll talk about that in just a moment. But before we do that, we have to show you this pub called the Albert. And Albert that is Prince Albert, of course, the husband of Queen Victoria. So this gives you some general information about this pub, its history. It was built 1845, originally known as the Blue Coat Boy, well it would be, and in June 1862 it was purchased by the Artillery Brewery, and then it was renamed in 1865 as the Albert, presumably in honour of Prince Albert. And also tells you here, which is something a very useful piece of information, one of the only buildings in Victoria Street to survive the Blitz in World War II. What makes it notable for pubs of this period is the frosted glass, which is very, very typical of Victorian public houses. So this is a really authentic Victorian pub. If you're looking to find authentic Victorian pubs. Right, it says here, the renowned Carvery restaurant on the first floor is frequented by British royalty, cabinet ministers and parliamentarians of note, the latter being recalled to Parliament by means of a division bell featured in the restaurant. That means that if the members of Parliament are dining here and then they are suddenly called to go back to the House of Commons, a bell rings in this place to inform them of the fact that they're needed in the House. Right, here we are. This is, by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the way I learnt my history of London, by reading all these notices, little bits of potted history. Now, put out on pubs and places like that, and blue plaques and so forth. Now, what we're doing here, I'm just showing you Victoria Street, and this way, in this direction, you've got Westminster Abbey, and going up in the other direction, that will take you up to Victoria Station. Okay, but we're not there yet, we're sort of between the two. Victoria Street was laid out in 1851. It's fairly recent, actually. This was a slum area, would you believe, even though it was so close to Buckingham Palace and the Abbey and the Houses of Parliament. But they did a massive sort of slum clearance in the latter half of the 19th century, and then they created this street, obviously to make it ease of access between Parliament and Victoria Station. And the other reason why is because just not far from here you have Wellington Barracks with the regiments of the Foot Guards, and once upon a time it used to have a detachment of guardsmen who used to march all the way from the regiment, from the battalion up there. They would come all the way down Victoria Street, and then they would march past the Abbey into Parliament Square, and then all the way along Victoria Embankment. And when they got to the end of Victoria Embankment, they then marched into Queen Victoria Street, which would take them up to the Bank of England. And they were doing that all the way from 1780 up until, I think it was 1960, it was thereabouts, but eventually they decided to discontinue the tradition. The tradition was established in 1780 after we had what we called the Gordon riots, and the Bank of England was attacked, and the last thing we could possibly have would be an attack on the Bank of England. So for that reason, a detachment of guardsmen was sent every night to protect it. And like all these things, you know, take an awfully long time to sort of rescind the order, but that's the way it is. Here, over the street, we have a view of Artillery Mansions. That's number 75, and these went up in 1895. And I think I'm right in saying, now I could be corrected on this, so but I have done my research, and I can't find anything to gainsay what I'm saying. This was the first purpose-built block of flats or apartments, usually for bachelors, young gentlemen. We'd have some money to live in a place like this, I dare say, but this went up in 1895. The sort of people who live there now, of course I don't know. I should imagine a general cross-section of society, but in those days it would be for young men of means. Right, let's turn around here to the left, because what I want to do is come into the green space known as Christchurch Gardens. Now, here we are. This is Christchurch Gardens, and Christchurch Gardens is one of the many green spaces in Greater London that relieve the oppression there would be if you didn't have any green space. Can you imagine? One of the most useless statistics I have is that 40% of all the land in Greater London, that covers over 600 square miles, is either parks or gardens or open spaces like this. And if you were to dig in the ground very deeply, you would eventually start digging up bodies, because, as I say, this was a churchyard for many, many, many years. No longer, though. But it relieves the tedium of all these buildings, which are not necessarily the most beautiful. And of course, that's something I have to say about London. we have this mixture, and I've already said it, of the good and the bad and the ugly. We have rather a lot of ugly buildings, I'm afraid to say, but we also have these very delightful areas in which you can sit down and you can relax, even on a day like this. Yesterday it was very, very sunny. Not quite so much today, but it is October, so you can't really expect miracles. I'm heading back in the general direction of Caxton Hall, which is directly ahead of me. But before I get there, before I turn around to the right, I'll show you this, which is the tribute. Let's read it out. This tribute is, what is it? It's created by the Suffragette Fellowship to commemorate the courage and perseverance of all those men and women who, in the long struggle for votes for women, selflessly braved derision, opposition and ostracism, many enduring physical violence and suffering. Nearby Caxton Hall was historically associated with women's suffrage meetings and deputations to Parliament. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. Right, turn round to the right. Oh, hang on, we've got something down here which will tell us more about the gardens. Now, burial grounds for the new chapel. There was a chapel directly ahead of us. It doesn't tell us though when the chapel was built. You see, as I say, I learned most of my history of London by reading stuff like this. I keep constantly coming across it, and after a while, there's a lifetime of absorbing all this stuff. Eventually it begins to sink in. By 1665, the time of the Great Plague, this site was fully established as an additional burial space for St Margaret, set near Westminster Abbey. The church here was one of those that suffered in the bombed to pieces in the Second World War. Here we have a rather interesting map showing the laying out of Victoria Street as it was in 1869. Now, I said it was 1851, but it took some time to actually build. That just shows you, doesn't it, what the place used to look like. So there's a number of interesting people here. They include Colonel Blood, who attempted to steal the crown jewels way back in the reign of Charles II. He is buried here. William Waller, an MP considered to be a parliamentary army. Now, he fought battles actually on behalf of the Roundheads, so he's buried here as well. His great battle was on Lansdowne Hill near Bath. Right, okay, well, we'll just turn around here and we'll just make our way round to the right. And as we make our way round to the right, we have just a little way ahead of us. It won't make itself obvious at the moment, but it's a memorial to a man called Henry Purcell, who was one of the great British composers. Now, Britain doesn't have too many composers, musical composers. That tends to be a thing in which the Italians or the Germans tend to excel at, or the Russians for that matter. Henry Purcell, 1659 to 1695. This is hardly a statue, it's a sort of, for the bust of Henry Purcell, with all sorts of curious stuff coming out of his head. I can't quite make out what it is, but anyway, Henry Purcell was the organist at Westminster Abbey, and he composed a lot of religious music, but he also composed music for the stage and also the opera Dido and Aeneas. And he lived not far from here, down Old Pye Street, the other end of Old Pye Street, and I'll point out Old Pye Street as I go past it. But he came back from the theatre late one night only to find that his wife had locked him out, and so he had to wander around the streets, and that's how he caught a chill, and he died. So that's why we lost Henry Purcell at a relatively young age. Right, I'm just going to cross over now while I get the chance to do it, because Otherwise I might not get the chance for a while. So I'm sorry if it's all a bit jerky. What I'm now doing is coming into Strutton Ground. Strutton Ground. And as I come into Strutton Ground, you can see for yourselves, ladies and gentlemen, that there is a street market. There's been a street market here for quite a little while. I think this goes back to 1862. Oh, that's Old Pie Street here. And as I said before, Henry Purcell used to live in a house which of course has long since disappeared further down Old Pie Street. If his house was still there, I suppose it might be a reason to go and see it, but since it's not, I shan't. The Grafton Arms here, over on the right hand side. Peter Sellers, Spike Milligan, Harry Seacombe and Michael Bentine. The Goon Show first exploded here. That would have been in the early 50s, so that's interesting. The Goon Show is something which is British humour. And if you're not British, you probably don't understand it, which is unfortunate. You just have to be British to understand this, some of British humour. This is Bon Bouche. Bon Bouche is a place where you can get a meal. I'm always looking for places where you can get a good food after the closing down of the restaurant in the Methodist Central Hall. So that looks quite promising, actually. Let's just see what they've got. Baguettes. Brie and bacon, £5. Brie and cranberry, £4.40. Well, you get some sort of idea. And this just gives you an idea of what there is to see. Okay, right, so we'll move on. Strutton Ground. I say it's one of London's street markets. It's a miniature version of Portobello Road and Petticoat Lane and places like that. And it's been here for, well, what, 1862, I can't do my maths at the moment, but a long, long time. 160 years, I suppose, more than that. And so these places were originally essential for the poor people living in this district. And today, as I say, it seems to be given over mostly to food, although we've got a shop for watches down here, over on the right. But it appears to be mostly food. Precision barbers. So just an ordinary London street, really. Except it's extraordinary in many ways. Ordinary is probably not the right word to use. Heading forward now, leading off on the left-hand side, is Great Peter Street. Peter, St. Peter, of course, being the patron saint of Westminster Abbey. You can also see the Peabody Trust, the Horseferry Road Estate. These were houses that were created by this trust that was set up by a man called George Peabody. He was an American who came to London around about 1840. And he came here on behalf of J.P. Morgan to raise money, to raise the capital that was needed for the construction of the American railroad. So he was instrumental in creating the American railroad system. Of course, at that time, Britain had really just invented the railroad, so that's why he came to London to raise the capital that was needed for that great enterprise. And had the railroads not been laid out as they were, America would be a very different country than it is now, and probably a great deal poorer as well. Now, Tothill Fields. We talked about Tothill. Oh, we're not. Oh, yes. Hang on. Sorry, I almost missed it. There, across the way, that other building, modern building, directly ahead of us. This is Channel 4. Channel 4 Studios. Channel 4 was launched in 1982, and it's a public television network. but they get their money from advertising. So this was the site of Tothill Fields at one time, and the Tothill, which, as I said, might have been anything. It could have been a Bronze Age barrow, a place where some very eminent chieftain, local chieftain, was buried way back in the day. Okay. And across the way we have, you've seen the Bluecoat School, of course, and this is Greycoat School. Greycoat School was actually, oh, shut up. The Greycoat School was opened in 1698, which means that it was here before the Bluecoat School. Does that say that? It does. 1698. Closed down as a school, I suppose, in 1955. What's it used at the present moment? I should imagine residential. Right. So carry on from here. Gone past the Bluecoat School and the Greycoat School, and making our way back towards Victoria Street. And to get there, what I propose to do in a moment is to cross over by way of this zebra crossing. This is one of these distinctive road crossings that always amuse American and other foreign visitors, how you get across the road. Once you're actually on a zebra crossing, you've got priority, you've got the right of way. Traffic have to stop. Like that taxi. Thank you very much. We've just come round here. Having come all the way down here, we see another pub which is called the Greencoat Boy. Now, from my research, I don't know of a Greencoat School. I only know of the Bluecoat School and the Greycoat School. Just wondering if there's anything on that. If there's a notice up here, but there isn't. Founded by, commemorates the Greencoat Hospital in Tothill Fields, founded by Charles I in 1633 by being a pub. So there must have been a Greencoats School. Actually, they're called hospital, but it's not what you think it means. I mean, that's just Britain, isn't it? It's not a place for sick people. A hospital is just simply any large building which offered hospitality to people for one reason or another, and the Greencoat School was a hospital, as it were, a place offering hospitality to students or pupils. So there must have been a school here in Tothill Fields, opened by King Charles I in 1633. I didn't know that. King Charles I, of course, was the man who triggered off the Civil War in 1642 and fought many battles against the Parliamentary Army, including Sir William Waller. And the trouble with him is he'd just lost too many of those battles, and eventually he was brought back down to London and put on trial on a charge of treason in 1649, early January 1649. He was found guilty of that offence, and he was then sentenced to be beheaded outside the banqueting house in Whitehall, which you have seen in an earlier video. Right, now we're going to cross this, close the gates against us. Okay, I think I can cross now. So let me do that while I've got the chance, because what I want to show you now, ladies and gentlemen, here is Westminster Palace. Westminster Palace Gardens, built in 1895 with all this ornate brickwork. Okay, There's not a place where I can just go back. If I extend this, I wonder what happens. Does that make it any easier? No, it doesn't actually. I thought it might. It's a shame. But you get some idea of the height and the extraordinary architectural detail that the Victorian architects of that period had, and the specially crafted terracotta bricks as a decorative adornment to the building. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I am heading back in the direction of Victoria Street, and across the way we have the Albert pub, which you've already seen. So what I think I'll do at this stage, ladies and gentlemen, is I will bring this video to a halt, and I'll start another one in due course, so just let this one go by.